The workers expected pipes, maybe old concrete, but what they uncovered beneath the street looked impossible. Buried under layers of earth was the first floor of an entire building, complete with windows, walls, and entrances. No records of collapse, no disaster anyone remembered, and nobody could explain how it got there. Had the building sunk? Was this evidence of a forgotten catastrophe? Or had an entire city somehow vanished beneath itself? The first sound is metal on stone, a dull, unexpected ring echoing up from the trench. The work is supposed to be simple. Break through old fill, lay pipe, move on. But the shovel won't bite. Instead, it scrapes across something that pushes back. The crew leans in, hands and boots caked with mud, expecting another chunk of concrete or a stubborn root. Instead, the surface beneath the dirt runs straight and true. It's not a boulder. It's not random rubble. The edge is sharp. The line is clean. As they clear more soil, what emerges is unmistakable. A wall, mortared brick, set with intention. The bricks run in courses, layered with a precision that only comes from human hands. Someone brushes away the last of the packed earth, and a window frame appears, glass long gone but the opening perfectly square. The wall keeps going, deeper, wider, revealing the ghost of a staircase, the suggestion of a hallway sealed in darkness. The men stand silent, tools idle. This isn't the guts of a sewer. It's the first floor of something built to stand in daylight, now buried under the city's own weight. No one has an answer. Who built this? Why is it here, below the street, hidden in plain sight? The only certainty is that the ground has given up a secret, and the ordinary has become impossible. What stretches out before them is no tangle of rubble, no accidental cavity. The ground has peeled back to reveal a space that makes immediate, unsettling sense. Brick walls run parallel, their mortar lines crisp and deliberate. Window openings stare back, glassless but framed by lintels and sills, as if waiting for daylight that will never return. A hallway extends beyond the reach of the work lights, its floor swept clean by decades of silence. Doorways lead nowhere, their thresholds intact. A staircase rises, each tread perfectly spaced, vanishing into earth packed tight above. The men step inside, boots echoing on a surface meant for shoes, not shovels. There is no sign of collapse, no chaos of broken beams or scattered debris. Everything is arranged as if the world outside had simply moved on, leaving this interior untouched and forgotten. This does not feel like a basement. The ceilings are too high, the proportions too generous. The windows are set for street-level views, now facing only dirt. There are no signs of fire or flood, no evidence of disaster. It is a room built for living, not hiding. A first floor, unmistakably. Yet here it sits, sealed beneath the city's feet. The question lingers in the stale air. How can a first floor exist below the street, preserved like a memory no one meant to keep? Each detail sharpens the impossibility, and the mystery only deepens. What happened to the world above this room, and how did the city come to rest on top of its own forgotten architecture? The first instinct is disaster. Flooding seems possible. A city overwhelmed, water surging in the night, drowning streets and swallowing whole blocks. It would explain the silence, the way earth presses against windows meant to face the open air, but the walls show no stains, no warped timbers or tide lines. There is no silt, no debris tangled in corners, no mark of a river's rage. The air is still, not sour with the memory of rot. Earthquake comes next, the thought of a sudden collapse, a city shaken and dropped into its own foundations. Yet the brickwork is unbroken, The staircase is undisturbed, every threshold and lintel holding its line. Mudslide, perhaps, a wave of earth sliding down and burying everything in its path. But the soil outside is packed, not layered, and there is no sign of violence or drift. The idea of a forgotten catastrophe lingers, a fire, a blast, some urban tragedy that forced people to seal these rooms and start again above. Each theory feels plausible for a moment, then falls apart under the weight of the evidence. The scene is too ordered, too quiet. If disaster did not bury this building, what did? The question hangs in the darkness, waiting for a reason that fits the facts. If disaster had struck here, a flood, a collapse, or a landslide, the evidence would be everywhere. Bricks would be cracked, walls buckled, beams snapped under impossible weight. Openings would be twisted, windows shattered, doorways blocked by rubble. Instead, the features remain sharp and precise. The window frames hold their square edges, lintels still rest atop their posts, and the hallways trace a straight line through the gloom. Even the staircase, so vulnerable in chaos, stands upright, with each step unbroken. There is no splintered wood, no jumble of fallen masonry, no scars from a city's panic. The scene refuses the logic of disaster. Instead of trauma, there is intention. Every threshold, every opening, every wall reads as if it was built to last, and then simply left behind. Why do these deliberate shapes survive, untouched by the violence that should have buried them? What force could cover a first floor so completely, yet leave every detail readable, every line clean? The contradiction lingers, deepening the mystery. If not destruction, then what? Shovels and guesses can only go so far. When the trench yields nothing but silent architecture, no sign of disaster, no clear cause, attention turns to the city's own records. Old survey maps, council minutes, and engineering drawings begin to matter more than rumour. Street levels, once taken for granted, become clues. Drainage complaints, petitions for relief from flooding, and the slow, methodical paperwork of urban change start to fill the gaps left by speculation. Patterns surface in the margins, notes about new pavement laid higher than the last, ordinances authorising entire blocks to be raised, ledger entries for fill and brick. The mystery widens. It's not just one buried floor, but hints of others, windows and doorways sealed below grade, staircases leading nowhere, all documented in the unremarkable language of bureaucracy. What starts as a single impossible space begins to look like part of a larger, deliberate transformation. The question shifts. If catastrophe did not bury these rooms, what did the city itself decide to cover up, and why? The answer waits somewhere in the archives, hidden in plain sight. June 6th, 1889. In the heart of Seattle's business district, a spark in a woodworking shop ignites a fire that will burn for 12 hours, swallowing 25 city blocks. The flames leave only stone skeletons behind, but the true devastation comes after the smoke. The city, already plagued by flooding and sewage rising up through the streets, finds itself standing on ground that can no longer be trusted. The old street level is too low, too close to the tide, too vulnerable to every heavy rain. City engineers, led by R.H. Thompson, face a choice. Rebuild as before and risk the same disasters, or attempt something almost unthinkable. Raise the city itself. The plan is radical. Seattle will not just clear the ruins. It will build new streets 1 to 2 stories higher than the originals, burying the old storefronts beneath 22 feet of fill. Brick retaining walls are built, hollow sidewalks constructed, and glass prisms set into the new pavement to channel daylight down into what was once the first floor. The city's own records document the transformation. Ordinances passed, property owners taxed according to the benefit of elevation, and construction crews moving mountains of earth from Denny Hill. As the new grade rises, the original windows and doors are bricked over. Staircases end abruptly at ceilings of packed dirt, and whole corridors are left sealed in darkness. Rooms built for commerce are now stranded below the surface. Seattle's answer is not disaster, but decision. The city chose to rise above its problems, leaving a hidden world beneath its feet. But how many other cities made the same choice? And what clues still linger under their streets? Reginald H. Thompson's name appears again and again in the city's ledgers, ordnance books, and engineering reports. His work was not the vision of a lone mastermind, but the product of a city bureaucracy wrestling with the aftermath of fire and flood. Seattle's leaders, pressed by the certainty of more disasters, chose an answer that would alter the map itself. The street grade would be lifted, not just patched or paved, but raised by as much as 22 feet. Thompson, as city engineer, became the architect of this transformation. He signed off on the plans and oversaw the contracts, but every step was documented in council minutes and improvement district records. The original street, what had once been the city's ground floor, was now a problem to be solved, not preserved. Crews built brick retaining walls along the old sidewalks, forming canyons that would soon be filled. Tons of earth, much of it scraped from Denny Hill, were poured in layer by layer until the new surface eclipsed the old. The city's new arteries ran above the bones of the old ones, and the first floors of buildings were left stranded below, sealed off from sunlight and foot traffic. Windows and doors that once faced bustling streets now stared into packed dirt. Staircases became dead ends. The city's official records described the process in the language of progress, but the result was strange. A new urban level, floating above its own shadow. What was once the ground floor became a lower room, an after-image of the city's past, hidden in plain sight. The question lingers: if the city could rise once, what else might be buried beneath its new beginning? On the streets above, Seattle bustled forward, its commerce and crowds drifting to a new altitude. But below, the old city lingered, silent and unchanged. Storefronts that once greeted the morning sun now faced only earth and shadow. Windows, still framed in brick and trimmed with stone, stared out into darkness. Doorways, designed for the traffic of daily life, opened onto packed fill instead of busy sidewalks. The buildings themselves had not fallen. They had simply been left behind, their first floors sealed off as the street level climbed above them. Merchants who had once swept these thresholds lost their place at the edge of the city's movement. The entrances, the glass, the carved lintels all survived untouched by disaster but cut off from their purpose. Above, new sidewalks floated on vaults and arches, their glass prisms channeling thin daylight into the hollow spaces below. Passages and corridors that once echoed with footsteps became part of a hidden layer, accessible only through forgotten stairwells or by the rare accident of a broken street. The buried city is no myth. It is municipal engineering made visible, a decision cast in brick and mortar, leaving a city's former life preserved beneath its own momentum. What else might remain, sealed and silent, just out of sight beneath the ordinary world? Chicago's story begins with water. Too much of it, in all the wrong places. Mid-19th century maps show a city pressed flat against the edge of Lake Michigan, built on ground so low and marshy that even a brief rain could turn streets into shallow lakes. The city's promise drew thousands, but its soil betrayed them. Standing water pooled in alleys and cellars, Wooden sidewalks floated on mud. Each summer, cholera and typhoid swept through the crowded neighborhoods, carried by water that could not drain, infecting rich and poor alike. Death moved quietly, but it moved everywhere. City leaders faced a problem that could not be paved over. The swampy ground made every improvement temporary. Sewage and stormwater had nowhere to go but back up through the same streets and homes they were meant to protect. The city's old ground level, once a mark of progress, had become a trap, too low for gravity to clear the filth, too dangerous to ignore. In 1855, a solution arrived in the form of Ellis S. Chesbrough, a civil engineer with a reputation for solving impossible problems. Chesbrough studied the city's topography and saw what others missed. The only way forward was UP. He drafted a plan to lift Chicago's streets and buildings above the swamp, creating space for sewers that could finally carry waste away. This was not a patch or a quick fix. It was a complete reimagining of the city's relationship to the land beneath it. The stakes were nothing less than survival. Failure meant more epidemics, more loss, and a city forever mired in its own waste. Success would require an act of collective will, a decision to raise not just a street or a block, but the very ground on which daily life unfolded. The question that haunted Chicago was simple. Could a city lift itself out of the mud, or would it be buried by its own history? Ellis Chesbrough's plan for Chicago was more than a fix. It was a reimagining of the city's very ground. The solution demanded a new kind of city, one that worked with gravity instead of fighting against it. Engineers mapped out a drainage system that would only work if the streets themselves rose above the swamp. The blueprints called for a network of brick sewers, not buried deep, but built at a new, higher grade, sometimes as much as 14 feet above the old street. The city would not just build new pipes, it would pour sand and clay across entire blocks, raising the surface layer by layer until the old street disappeared beneath. This was not a patchwork of repairs, but a city-wide decision written into ordinances and council minutes. Property owners were taxed for the privilege of elevation, their contributions calculated by the foot and by the benefit. The fill came from nearby borrow pits, carted in by horse and wagon, and poured into the spaces between new stone curbs and timber-retaining walls. Some buildings would be lifted by jack screws, inch by inch, until their front doors opened onto the new grade. Others would be left behind, their windows and thresholds buried, their first floors turned into basements overnight. The new city emerged slowly, block by block, as engineers measured each rise and crews packed the earth tight. The transformation was visible in the ledges and in the changing skyline. Where once the city drowned in its own waste, now water flowed away, carried off by gravity and design. Yet beneath the new order, the old city remained, sealed in darkness, its first floors waiting in silence. If the city could raise itself from the mud, what else might it have left hidden below the surface? Across the heart of old Chicago, a scene unfolded that defied belief. Whole buildings, brick and stone, were raised off the ground while life inside continued as if nothing had changed. Merchants stood behind their counters, customers browsed shelves, and the slow, silent work of hundreds of jack screws lifted entire rows of shops into the air. Newspaper reports from 1858 described the spectacle: brick facades that ran for entire blocks rising inch by inch, the clatter of gears and timbers below, while commerce never paused. Not a pane of glass cracked, not a shelf toppled. The city's engineers had calculated every turn, each screw working in perfect unison. The answer, at last, is undeniable. The buried first floor was never swallowed by disaster. It was not a casualty of flood or earthquake. The ground did not betray the building. Instead, the city itself changed its shape. Streets rose, sidewalks climbed, and what was once the ground floor became a secret chamber beneath the new world above. The evidence is plain. Original windows, doorways, and staircases remain intact, preserved not by accident, but by the deliberate will of a city determined to survive. This is not just a story of Chicago or Seattle. The same hidden layers may wait beneath the streets of other cities, Galveston, London, New York, where ordinary roads cover extraordinary secrets. Every buried window, every sealed doorway is a silent clue left by a city that refused to sink, choosing instead to rise. And as workers dig new trenches, the question lingers. How many more forgotten first floors still lie in darkness, waiting to be found? Beneath the noise of modern streets, entire chapters of urban life remain sealed in darkness, proof that cities bury their own past to survive. Today, utility crews still stumble onto lost doorways and forgotten windows, reminders that the ground beneath us is layered with secrets. Every city holds its own hidden architecture, waiting for the next accidental discovery. What else lies just beneath our feet? Thanks for watching.